well this evening, and you?
Good.
Actually, I think it's still afternoon for the next 3 and some odd minutes.
Is 6 o'clock the cutoff?
There we go. Yeah, something like that. We are now streaming, by the way, folks. So this is going out over Facebook and YouTube right now. And as soon as Caroline gives me, there you are, Caroline. Good evening.
Sorry, I have two screens going, which does not work well. But then I was logging into everything to get us live in the world.
And you are. And do you want me to switch TV3 on?
Yep, because they should be starting in just a few minutes, so that would be great.
I am working on that as we speak.
Okay. Hey, Sharon, Cecilia just emailed you those documents that you needed.
I just got them.
She sent them as PDF, but then she resent them, so you should have them in the format you need as well.
I got them and I printed them.
Okay, sorry about that.
And you are now live on TV3.
All right, perfect, thanks. Hi, Wayne and Greg.
Hello.
And I will disappear.
Bye, John.
See you later.
Thank you.
All right, I'm just going to go help our resident at the counter, and I'll be right back, and hopefully we'll have some more people joining us.
Hi, Greg.
How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Great, thanks.
You're the only name I recognize. I didn't know Wayne before.
Hi, Anna.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Anna.
How's everyone doing?
All right, I'm just going to give our chairperson a quick call while we're waiting here.
Doug, can you tell me what your last name is?
Yes. it
Doug?
is- Yeah, it's Heestand, and that's Heestand.
Thank you.
Sorry, everyone. I'm just trying to get some technical issues sorted out here. So that's kind of become the norm, hasn't it?
So while you're waiting for Sam to get connected, I'll just give you guys the reminders if you haven't heard them a million times by now for Zoom meetings. So any of the applicants and their team and the board members need to be present during the conversation for their item during the board with both audio and video. We do have some members of the public here tonight. One of the items is a public hearing in which the board will take public comment. On the other items, they're set for discussion. The board could choose to take public comment or not take public comment, up to them. If members of the public want to speak, they will be able to raise their hand and we will invite them over to share their thoughts with the board. And any votes and motions the board makes, everything will have to be done via a roll call vote.
All right. I do apologize for the delay, but I think we're ready to get underway here. And I'd like to officially call to order the meeting for September 2nd. It's a few minutes after 6. And we are going to begin, as always, with an informational exchange. And I believe Caroline has an update for us on the activities, recent activities of the Project Review Board.
Actually, that has since changed. The Project Review Board took the month of August off, so I don't have any updates on their actions since the last meeting.
All right, that's easy enough. Anybody else have any information to exchange? Moving right along then to item 2, which is a zoning ordinance amendment for the VC1, which is tonight we have a public hearing, and the applicant is proposing an amendment to section 413 of the VC1 this change would allow existing single-family dwellings in the district to be a permitted use. The applicants are Gary and Heather Sylvester from 19 Morse Street. We had some discussions with them a couple of months ago. And I guess before we open the public hearing, is there any new information that the Sylvesters want to present, or anything of that nature?
Nothing new at this time.
All right. Do I hear a motion to open the public hearing?
I moved.
Second. All in favor? Do I have to roll call this, Caroline? Yeah, okay. Greg.
Aye.
Aaron.
Aye.
Wayne.
Aye.
And Anna.
Aye.
I also vote aye. So with that, the public hearing is now open. So I feel like this one is fairly straightforward, as we discussed it last time. Are there any comments from the board based on the application? Nope. All right. Caroline, is there anything that you wanted to add or kind of make us?
We do have quite a few members of the public here, so I'll just recap that this was an applicant-driven agenda item by Gary Sylvester. He has an existing single-family home in the downtown Freeport area. He's lived here for quite some time, and he wanted to do an addition. He found out he was in the Village Commercial 1 zone, where single-family homes are currently not a permitted use. Because they are non-conforming, the only way they can add on is by getting a variance by the Board of Appeals, to which there's limitations and standards that have to prove hardship, which is quite a challenge. So Gary was before we talked about a couple different options. So the wording before you tonight would simply add existing single-family homes as of whatever date this would be adopted, which would ultimately be up to the council. That they would be considered conforming uses. So it wouldn't be permitting new single family homes. It would just make, the dozen or so that we have conforming. So hopefully that will allow them to add on and be able to stay in their home for years to come. And you do have members of the public. You're ready to take public comment, Sam? So if anyone from the public would like to comment, you can go ahead and use the raise hand feature. Okay, Sam, Sheila Town would like to comment. Can I invite her over to talk?
Yes, please.
Okay, Sheila, you're live. You just need to unmute.
Okay.
We can hear you.
You can hear me. You can't
Yeah.
see me though, right? Or not?
We can't see you.
Okay. I'm Sheila Town, my husband Derek Town. We renovated our little house here on Cross Street, and we've been in the neighborhood. What's left of the neighborhood is these great little houses, and it's really important that we can stay in our neighborhood. And our houses are little, and I think it's nice if someone wants to add on to their house, it's not going to affect commercial street. It's not going to affect everything, except it will just make people be able to stay here longer. And it just makes no sense that I could have a store on my front yard, but I can't build out a bigger kitchen in my backyard, but I could have a store on my driveway. That makes no sense. So I think, obviously I didn't have anything written, but I just think it's a great idea. Our houses that we've been here, living here for a long time, that are already established, why does it matter if we want to do a bump out, extend a little in the back or on the side? It won't affect anything commercially. So I think anyone who's still living here in these houses that have been here before all this commercial was here, that we should be able to add on to our homes, and it will enhance the community. So we're all for the Sylvester's adding on. And I think they do it tastefully and right. So I know a lot of people in the neighborhood think it's a great idea, and it's ridiculous that we can't add on because we're commercial. You know, no one's using it as commercial. We're using it to live and raise our families. So we hope to keep it that way and make it easier. So the towns are say thumbs up. Okay. Did that make sense? Sorry. I tend to ramble.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Sure.
Do we have other members of the public who'd like to weigh in on this? And just a reminder, you do need to, I don't even know how to do it honestly myself, but somehow there's a raise hand feature on there. And if you put your hand up, we are certainly ready and willing to invite you into the meeting.
That point across. When you say so.
Anyone else?
I don't see any other hands being raised.
Okay. Are there any concerns about this amendment from the board or from anybody else present? Or are we ready to vote to send it to the council?
I have no concerns, but I'm just curious, did the current zoning ordinance predate or postdate the existence of these small houses?
That's a great question. I don't know, but I can give you a little bit of the history here. These houses kind of behind, well, not all of them, but this neighborhood where the applicant lives is behind LL Bean. There's actually two zones back there. Some is Village 1, which is kind of a transition between as you get out of the commercial area and towards more of the rural areas. It has a little bit of low intensity commercial uses, but it's primarily residential. So some of these houses used to be in Village 1, and then back, I can't remember if it was the 80s or 90s, but back at some point in time when Freeport was just really taking off with commercial development, neighbors petitioned to be included in the Village Commercial 1. And, you know, we did see a lot of houses back there get sold and turned into other things or parking. So the change was made years ago, but now the houses are still there. They hadn't been developed commercially, and we have a lot of residents that have lived there for quite a while. I mean, due to the age of the house, your question, some of them could predate zoning, but the change was more recent. It was really when, you know, Freeport started to develop into what it is today.
So just as a technical matter, the ordinance may have made existing structures unlawful.
Yes, yep, it did. It would have made them non-conforming, which, you know, I looked back and I couldn't really tell why. My only thought was that, you know, people asked to go commercial. Maybe they thought that all these properties would sell and there wouldn't be houses there anymore. But yeah, I don't know why they didn't keep it to give them some flexibility.
Thanks, Caroline.
Sure. And just a reminder, Sam, you do have the public hearing open still. And if somebody does decide that they want to make a motion, there was a draft motion on page 2 of the staff report that would just have to have the finding completed.
All right. In the absence of further public comment, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
All right. All in favor? Greg?
Aye.
Aaron?
Aye.
Wayne?
Aye.
And Anna?
Aye.
And I also vote aye. So that closes the public hearing. Has somebody had a chance to navigate to the proposed motion? And just as a reminder, any proposed motion does need to find this proposed change to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. I'm sure we can do, because it very much seems to be within the vision of the comprehensive plan, at least as I personally see it. Anybody like to read that motion? I would do it, but I can't.
Chairman, I don't have the staff report in front of me, so I'm going to also defer.
I don't mind taking a stab at it, but I guess if you have the staff report, it says proposal is consistent with the 2011 Town of Freeport Comprehensive Plan in that, and then there's a big blank line. I guess my question, Caroline, would be, is there a specific, some specific language in the plan that talks about, you know, the mixed use and keeping people in their homes that could be briefly summarized?
Part of it that I think, sorry to jump in, Caroline, the part of it that I see as being particularly relevant here is the desire to encourage people to live close to town and encourage walkability and encourage population density closer to the center of town rather than sprawl into the rural residential districts, which I think is a good thing. As somebody who lives within walking distance of town myself, I certainly think it's great to have a vibrant downtown. Other thoughts from the board on comp plan alignment?
And so you did have the vision of the comp plan was on page 3 and 4 to kind of help you, where, you know, there's always a whole bunch of implementation strategies as well. And so I think, you know, some of the things, Greg, that Sam touched upon would kind of be under that first bullet of things that would continue to make Freeport a desirable place to live. So that kind of helps you.
All right, like the last one there, just
yeah, see, the last one Greg's referring to is Freeport would continue to be a desirable place to live by maintaining and improving the walkability and bikeability of the town's neighborhood so as to encourage community health and safety. Then you have a couple other ones up near the top there, I think, that might touch upon, you know, variety of neighborhoods and housing types.
okay. All right, I'd like to make a motion then, I guess. You ready? All right. Be it ordered that the Freeport Planning Board recommend that the Freeport Town Council adopt proposed amendments to section 413 of the Freeport zoning ordinance to allow existing, as of date of adoption, single-family dwellings in the village commercial DC1 district to be a permitted use that the board finds that the proposal is consistent with the 2011 Town of Freeport Comprehensive Plan, in that it would allow a variety of neighborhoods and housing types at a variety of prices, and would maintain and improve the walkability and bikeability of the town's neighborhoods so as to encourage community health and safety.
We have a second?
Second?
Aaron, I saw Aaron second that, so I think that counts, right? So if we go with the roll call again. Greg?
Aye.
Aaron?
Aye.
Wayne?
Aye.
And Anna?
Aye.
And I also vote aye. So I believe the next stop for you, Mr. Sylvester, is the town council. And I think I speak on behalf of the board saying we wish you the best of luck over there. I think it is a good change and one that is consistent, certainly with the vision of the town and the history of those neighborhoods. So I think I'm excited about it.
Great. Thank you. I'm pretty excited myself. Appreciate all your support.
Yeah, definitely.
Good luck.
All right. That brings us to the third item for tonight. As I find my agenda, shuffling virtual papers. Item number 3 is a new section. The applicant, sorry, let me back up. Item number 3 is a zoning ordinance and map amendment, continued discussion. And this is a map amendment for the proposed Desert of Maine overlay district. The applicant is proposing a new section to the town of Freeport zoning ordinance and associated map amendment to create an overlay district for the Desert of Maine at their property at 95 Desert Road, which is map 22, lot 8, and amendments to section 104, which are the definitions, are also proposed. So this is kind of a follow-up to the discussion from what feels like yesterday. It was just 2 weeks ago. We have the applicants here. Doug and Mila are back with us. So you guys have updates for us that we'd like to start out with?
I think we'd like to just let our attorneys speak on our behalf. I think what we did was really take the feedback from council, a lot of the concerns, and try and work those into the language. I think what we heard was the concern, what would happen when this changes hand, and we're also responding to a lot of our neighbors' concerns as well. So Jim, Brandon, I think you can speak to the language we put together.
If we may. Jim Katsifikis and Brandon Mazer, can you hear us all right?
I certainly can. I think
We're trying a new camera and
go.
mic. We want to make sure that it comes through. If you have any problems, please let us know. We'll adjust accordingly.
Will do.
Thank you very much. This has been a process, putting together a plan to allow the goals the Heastons have to be put into effect. We started meeting with town staff about a year ago. We've had several meetings with staff to try to work through what might be the best way to bring this forward. We've had the pleasure of working with this board. Back in June, I think we had a workshop talking about this when we were still trying to refine things. And then last month, Brandon met with you. What we're talking about here is a combination of a zoning text change to create this new overlay zone for the desert of Maine, and a map change to put that overlay on one particular parcel. I know a number of questions were asked. Brandon and I have discussed that. We've talked with the Heastons and our team about that. We think that we have addressed those issues in the new improved revised draft that you have before you this evening. I'll take you through it briefly. And certainly we understand there will be questions. We hope at the end of this that the planning board is satisfied that we have a draft that we can bring to a public hearing in October. Well, let's just go through that and see where we are. There are really three overriding goals that the Heastons have with regard to this property. One of them is to continue and improve and modernize, in a sense, the desert of Maine, so that its historic feature, its natural feature can be celebrated, and it can be a family-friendly amusement or entertainment. So it's a tourist destination, and that's how we've defined it here. So that's one aspect of it. A second one is to modernize the campground. We've talked about it a couple of times, but campgrounds are moving in the direction of being maybe a little more tourist friendly. The idea here is to allow for a certain number of cabins. They would not be dwellings. They would be structures, these shelters. They would have walls and a roof, but they would not be dwelling units with both cooking facilities and toilet facilities. They would be used, they may be permanent structures, but they would be used seasonally. And those restrictions are put in the ordinance. So they want to modernize the campground, modernize the camping experience. What they'd also like to do is add a new use. And that new use is for an old building. It's the 1827 Tuttle Barn. And the idea is to repurpose that barn, rebuild it, renovate it, and make it into an indoor art center. That's a new use for the site. This is a 55-acre site as it stands right now. So it's a large site, and it's proposed that these uses would be carried on. We know one of the concerns was that there was a large list of uses. We're limiting it. Those are the goals. So in looking to the zoning text and amendment process, here's how we're trying to help achieve those goals. Campgrounds already are a permitted use in the RR1 with site plan review. This has been in existence since before the 1970 adoption of zoning in Freeport, but the campground is a permitted use. The desert of Maine has existed since the 1920s or 1930s. Mila has done all of the historical research and could be our expert on exactly when and how that started. but it started way before the 1970 adoption of zoning by Freeport. So, but it's not mentioned in the zoning ordinance. So we have this little island of RR1, rural residential 1, that contains this 55 acre parcel with the desert of Maine that doesn't even recognize the desert of Maine as a use. It is a use, it's a recreational use, it's an informational area, historic area, natural area. Pre-exist zoning, it's a lawful non-conforming use. That's how it is under the current ordinance. What this ordinance does is create an overlay zone to accept all of the RR1 uses, those remain. But on top of those, there are certain uses and certain requirements for those uses. And primary among that, for the new uses, would be the desert of Maine as a tourist destination. Let's recognize this longstanding commercial use that's been on this property since, for almost 100 years. Let's recognize that as being lawful, not just a lawful non-conforming use. It would be subject to site plan review. If it stayed exactly the way it is today, it wouldn't go through subdivision site plan review. It would be grandfathered. But the idea is that if you were going to start a tourist destination in this overlay district from scratch, it would be subject to site plan review regardless of its size. And then the art center indoor is added to the zone. So we're talking about two uses, two primary principal uses in this new zone. Tourist destination to recognize what's been there historically, and the art center indoor to allow the redevelopment of that 1827 tunnel barn. That too would be subject to site plan review. It's a brand new use, its renovation, and its use for this purpose would all go through site plan review. What we're also looking at here is trying to address some of the uses that go along with those. There's a gift shop that's existed for a long time. You get the kids geodes when you go out to the desert of Maine. You get some artwork, some flags, whatever, little trinkets that might go with it. But there also has been some art on exhibit out there. The idea is to have a cafe go along with that, not to compete with the restaurants in town, not as its own attraction, not as its own use, but like you see in museums all over Maine, a small cafe for the people who were there. We're talking about the potential for art to be exhibited, whether it's in the barn or whether it's exhibited in the cafe. If you go into any coffee shop in Freeport or Portland, there are usually paintings hanging on the wall, arts for sale. It would be no different in this cafe. And when we say the local retail trade as an accessory use, we're talking about selling the gifts, selling the geodes, selling the artwork, those sorts of things. We're not talking about a major facility. And then outdoor recreation accessory to the tourist destination. There's a trail right now, so those who cannot walk can ride around the desert of Maine. And the idea is to maintain this sort of trail. It meanders a little bit onto neighboring property. And it comes back on. So there's a vehicular trail that can be used for people who can't walk to enjoy the area. So we're looking for those sorts of tourist events or family-friendly events that might occur. Maybe it's face painting, maybe it's sand art. What better at the desert of Maine? There certainly should be plenty of raw material. So we're looking at the zoning to try to institute and allow campground use and let it be modernized. It's been there for a long time. The desert of Maine has been there for almost 100 years, and let that continue and modernize. And then to add to it, this indoor art center. And the indoor art center is something that's mentioned in the comprehensive plan in the sense of promoting the arts, allowing the arts to be promoted in Freeport. That's the vision that Freeport has in its latest comprehensive plan updates to try to move forward to diversify its economic base beyond just retail, or primarily retail, like taking in arts, culture. And this would allow for that vision to be implemented on this property. So we recognize this is just the first step. If we have to go through, we go through the rezoning, and if you make the recommendation to the council and the council adopts this, we still have to go through site plan review. We still have to make sure that this fits, we get all the permits that are necessary. What we're hoping to do through this process is make clear what's allowed on the property, principal uses or accessory uses, that is compatible with the RR1, that we're allowed to do this with the overlay, and then can go to the planning board, come back before you with the actual site plan, so that these goals can be achieved, this vision can be put into place. I know there are several questions and concerns that were raised the last time. In the draft, we've tried to address those. The letter of August 26th that we've provided to you highlights all of those changes, but we have reduced the number of principal uses to 2. There's no longer a laundry list, and what we've done is we've put into the list of uses accessory those things that we believe will be reasonably accompanying this. Instead of making them principal uses and confusing the issue, we've added 2 principal uses, we've listed the accessory uses, we've made it clear that site plan review will be required. The food truck will be subject to the performance standards in section 526A of your ordinance. Those apply. They will not have generators and they won't be playing any amplified music. That ordinance, those performance standards already put substantial restrictions on how many food trucks can appear and how often. We have amended the definition of campground that you've seen to make sure that these will not be residential units. They won't have both kitchen and toilet facilities or cooking and toilet facilities as would be required for a dwelling unit. And of course, we're keeping that provision that we had in this originally. These will only be used seasonally, May 1 to November 1 each year. With regard to bulk standards and space standards, there was a concern, how many of these can you fit? I mean, we wouldn't want 10 entertainment facilities or indoor arts centers on 155-acre parcel. What we've done is put a minimum lot size requirement of 10 acres on each of the principal uses. The campground use that's permitted already, the tourist destination, and the indoor arts center. So there's a requirement of at least 10 acres. Grouping all 3 of these uses on a 55-acre lot, we're getting up pretty close to that limit. So this should limit the ability of future owners of this property or anyone else who seeks to make use of this overlay someplace else. Will limit their discretion to be able to maximize one of these and put many more, develop more intensely. With regard to buffering, when under the buffer area section 506 of your ordinance, whenever you've got a use that's abutting a residential district, there's a buffer required equal to the side or rear. The side setback here is 50 feet, and it's a side lot line along most of this frontage with other lots. So we're proposing a 50-foot retained wooded buffer, basically the retained wooded buffer that's there. Any forest area that's there, we would maintain what's there. 50 feet around this with a couple of carve-outs. One is the access road, and that's for obvious reasons, but also for any rights of way or trails that are in existence as of the date of the ordinance adoption, and that's because there's a trail that meanders off this property onto adjoining property and back. It's been used, it is being used, and I'd like to be able to continue to use that that particular trail in the roadway, and also for anticipated overflow parking lots. There's an overflow parking out toward the front that's projected in a draft site plan. And again, we're not here for site plan review, but we wanted to give you an idea of what we're thinking about. And so there's a potential that that overflow parking could be seen. We know that in site plan, we would want to, we would be asked to provide screening of some other kind, fencing, whatever, and we were prepared to work with that during site plan review. But the idea is to create a buffer, it's 50 foot around this district, around this lot, so that the uses are buffered from the residential uses to try to respect the privacy and the peaceful enjoyment of our neighbors. With regard to parking, we're proposing a shared parking here. The district, the Desert of Maine primarily attracts people in the morning and afternoon times, daytimes. The indoor art center is primarily going to be used in the evening. So there's not going to be much overlap. And to try to size a parking lot to fit both all the time, it not only is bad on our end in terms of the expense of preparing a parking lot, but it's bad on the town end too, for the simple reason that there's more impervious area created than you need. More runoff is generated, more stormwater that we have to worry about. We're all in communities with highly regulated stormwater regimes. We want to minimize the amount that we're generating, and for that reason, we are proposing shared parking at 50% because there is no real overlap, very, very little overlap between the two uses and the time of use. So that's in there as well for a standard. We will abide by the noise standard, which for the RR1 is the most stringent in the town, 55 decibels in daytime hours and 45 during nighttime hours. And we will abide by the lighting standards that was discussed the last time, but we understand that there is a lighting provision in section 521A with regard to cutoff fixtures and height of fixtures, and we will abide by that. Those are, I think, were the major issues. There was one other that was brought up, and that was, why isn't this illegal spot zoning? And spot zoning is a term that's used whenever you're changing the zoning of a particular parcel. And people will look at that and say, well, is that right? That you're changing it just for that one parcel? And the answer is that spot zoning is not in and of itself illegal. The state Supreme Court has weighed in on this, and they have stated that so long as it's consistent with the comprehensive plan, you can have zoning on one parcel only. And as we've mentioned, this zoning provide for the Arts Center, to provide for the opportunities here for recreation, for nature, it is consistent with the comprehensive plan. So it's not illegal spot zoning. It's spot zoning, but not illegal spot zoning. So that's what we have prepared for this evening to talk about, going through all of these changes, and we invite the comments. First of all, I'd like to invite Doug and Mila to jump in if I missed anything here, and Brandon as well.
You captured it. Thank you.
But if you would be glad to hear what the board has to say and to take your comments. We want to make this ready so that we can go to public hearing in October and welcome your comments.
Speaking for myself, I think my only remaining question, I think you guys have done a nice job of addressing most of the concerns that were brought 2 weeks ago. For me, the last, or at least the biggest remaining concern is about the distinction between a residential dwelling unit and the sorts of units that you're proposing. So you state that they would be permanent structures, which makes sense, and then that they wouldn't have both a bathroom and a kitchen, which makes something a dwelling unit, but one or the other. I mean, mixed. I just see some gray areas there where maybe there's a bathroom that's not I don't know. I see, I guess personally, I'd like to see a little bit more specificity about what could be included in one of these units, and how many bathrooms is too many bathrooms for a permanent structure that's meant to be just a sort of a campground style shelter.
Fair enough. The concept here, well, the bathroom facilities are shared bath facilities in one building at the campground, as I understand it. Am I right, Doug, Mila?
Yeah.
Again, I guess I'm not so concerned about this proposal, from I'm not looking for a site plan review. I'm thinking ahead. I'm thinking, into the future on the next, if there are future ownership, and especially given that the minimum lot size that you're proposing is 10 acres, I could imagine, if the next owner chooses 3 campgrounds with 10 acres, we could end up with a lot of these little dwelling units that might have, I think we need to be thinking, we're not here for the site plan part of it. So I think it's, I'm trying to look into the future.
Understood. We were looking at the definition of dwelling under your ordinance, and a room or group of rooms designed and equipped exclusively for use as permanent, seasonal, or temporary living quarters for only one family at a time, and containing living, sleeping, toilet, cooking facilities. There will be living area in this shelter. There will be sleeping area. The toilet in this facility is a shared separate buildings. There won't be toilet facilities in these shelters. Cooking facilities, it's not intended. There will be a sink. That's why we left it open in a sense. There may be some people who would choose to build shelters like this in Freeport who might say, I'm going to include a toilet facility, but there'll be no cooking facilities. There may be some people who would want to take advantage of this who would do the latter, do the opposite. And that's why it was left that way. We discussed it briefly with staff and thought maybe that would allow for flexibility, but we're not looking for anything that would cause problems for the town or cause any issues down the road. So if there are suggestions as to how to address that, we'd be happy to entertain them.
That's helpful to give the background and the intent of the intent was to provide flexibility. So,
Sam, can I add one clarification for the board?
mhm.
The two definitions are to the definition section of the ordinance. So the amended definitions as proposed would apply anywhere in Freeport to those uses. Whereas the remainder of the language is specifically for the new overlay. So this could apply, definition of the campground could apply here or to a campground on the other side of town. Just to be clear in your follow-up to your comments.
And that includes tourist destination as being a new category of definition in our zoning ordinances.
Yes, although the only place it would be listed as a permitted use as of if this were to go forward would be this district. It's not listed, but potentially someone else could come propose an amendment to add it in a different zone under a separate application, should they want to do that.
And they would have to explain to you why it's consistent with the comprehensive plan.
And I presume this overlay is not intended to be any kind of template for future requests for overlays. This is just a independent approval that has no precedential value.
That's addressed to me. It's intended not to have any other precedential value. This is a unique lot, a unique parcel in Freeport where you have this long-standing history of a tourist destination, desert of Maine. I can't think of anything else in Freeport that's like it.
It's the only desert we have.
That's why we're here.
Safe. That's a safe thing to say. Yes. Yep. Any other comments from the board before we see if anyone can figure out how to raise their hand online? People feel like, does the board feel generally like the concerns from 2 weeks ago have been addressed? Yep. All right. Do we have any public comment?
So I did circulate the board some public comment prior to the meeting. We did hear some additional comments from abutters. Concerns include things like traffic, noise, adding a restaurant use, and they had, some questions about the assembly use and some concerns about, I'd say general concerns living close to a property. You do have another 6 people in attendance. I don't see any hands raised as of yet, but if anyone wants to speak, they can raise their hand and we'll let them in. It does not look like you have any oh, we have one. S. Hale, I'll let them over if it's okay, Sam. Okay, the person showing up as S. Hale, you can unmute.
I just did.
Oh, we can hear you now.
Oh, great, thanks. We live on Hunter Road, and I apologize, we weren't able to attend the last meeting, so I don't want to, ask questions or waste time having folks go over things that were already talked about. But we do share, sounds like some of the concerns of other neighbors. We have those same concerns. a lot of it does have to do with traffic and the number of visitors that I guess are potentially coming to the new use. You probably heard this from other folks that these roads in this area are extremely busy already. And I guess that's changed over the years. I know the large LL Bean facility down closer to 295 created a lot of that traffic, but adding another source of I guess high volume traffic to this supposedly rural residential area is one of our concerns. And I'm sorry to ask questions that have maybe been asked before, but like, what is the increase in visitorship or parking versus what it is now? Can someone answer that?
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think this is something we've thought a lot about. The only use that would increase traffic is really the indoor art center use. And the way we're thinking about that is this is not going to be, I mean, our intent is to have a concerts occasionally, a couple times a month is kind of the maximum cadence we're thinking. And so that adds, if we were able to like sell out our small venue, maybe 50, 75 cars an evening every couple of weeks during the summer, and probably quite a bit less often in the off season. I think it's important to note that it's off hours from when LL Bean is highly active, and it's also the school, the Waldorf school, in the morning and evening rush hour. We think it will be after those times. So we hear the concern. We think it's quite minimal in terms of the actual number of cars over a month period.
Yeah, we already have visitors coming to the tourist attraction. We just want it to become recognized as a tourist attraction that it has been since the 1920s.
Yeah.
Sure. Am I still on the mic?
Yeah.
Okay. No, I mean that. Thanks for that. The answer to that question. Another, I guess, just kind of more general question I would have for the board is I'm just trying to understand the process here. We understand there's a long history of a particular use at the site that's been grandfathered for quite some time. My understanding is this property was recently purchased by the applicant in the last, I'm not sure exactly, it sounds like about 1.5 years ago or something. So they have purchased the property and now are proposing some pretty significant changes to the use that was previously grandfathered. And I guess I'm just curious about and it sounds like maybe this was talked about a bit before as well, just the precedent that is set where, if someone can buy a property knowing I'm assuming that they were aware when they purchased it that what they want to do was not allowed by the zoning, and purchased it anyways. And now, come before the board with these proposals that the town needs to change the zoning to allow those uses. I'm curious. The order of that is curious to me. And also if I was the board, I would be concerned that the message being sent as well, if you buy something and you can't do something, well, come before us and maybe we can change the zoning to make what you want to do work. I'm probably stating that maybe oversimply, but the perception is, I can say, talking to folks, that the perception out there is a little curious as to how someone would buy something knowing that they can't do something on it and then have to get the zoning changed afterwards. So I don't know if there's any answer to that or not, but I just wanted to make that observation.
I think the answer, and I think I'm speaking for the board here, so feel free, other board members, to jump in. The answer from the board's perspective is that this property is in a unique position, which is something that's been brought up tonight already. And then B, the fact that a change would be made, you know, any change for any parcel, this one or any other in the future, or presumably any in the past, any change that's made is made because it's consistent with the comprehensive plan of the town. So, you know, if somebody comes and wants to do something in another location that is consistent with the comprehensive plan that the people who live in the town and work for the town have worked hard to put together, then, you know, people are always welcome to come and propose those changes. So I think, and they're taken up on a case-by-case basis, as they have been and will continue to be. So I think that sort of sums up, and correct me if I'm wrong, board members, but that sort of sums up how we as a board feel about this project, is that, you know, it is, at least in our discussion so far, it is a use that would be comprehensive with, or sorry, would be compatible with the comprehensive plan as it's currently written.
And I agree with what Sam said. I would add, just to be specifically responsive to the speaker's question, the applicants, if they buy a non-conforming property, non-conforming to the use they plan for it, they do take the risk. You know, in this case, it may be that the board is fully in support of the proposal and that it meets all the tests and it's a good policy and it's consistent with the comprehensive plan. But there could be an example where somebody would buy a property, take the risk, and not be so lucky because it wouldn't meet those tests. So I don't think that this sends any message that people have the automatic right to buy a property that's non-conforming and assume that they have a right to that use. So I don't think it's a problem.
Sure, that makes
Answer your
sense.
question.
Presumably, they purchased the property taking that risk, and now they're seeing how it's all going to play out. I think those are good answers. And, you know, regarding the comprehensive plan, we did look that over, and yeah, I could see how you would say it doesn't seem to be in any conflict with the comprehensive plan. I guess the question would be just in terms of the benefit of allowing this type of very specific zoning change to one property. The question could be asked, well, is the town benefiting by that, or is the applicant benefiting by that? It's not clear to me how this really benefits the town of Freeport in any substantial way, but maybe you've heard that from other folks. It's just an observation.
If I could say something quickly, you might have already heard this, the speaker, but you know, this is just a very initial step. It seems like if we're agreed to these changes, then it'll be the public hearing and more participants of the public can show up. And then it has to go to the town council, or is it the project site review board or the town council then?
The next step would be to go to the council to adopt the zoning, and then if the zoning change is adopted by the council, then after that, all of these changes still stipulate that the project would be subject to site plan review before getting approved for construction.
Thanks, Sam. So this is just, you know, the very initial step, but I think when we had talked about it being in line with the comprehensive plan for the cultural component of Freeport, I know for me personally, that was an important aspect of bringing arts and culture to our town in a way that it's not currently. And in the last meeting, they spoke a lot about this very historic barn that they're spending a lot of time and money restoring, and which are going to have these acoustic concerts at. And so having a historical building like that with music was something that I think does bring some value to the town. And that's the way I personally have seen it. But I do hear your concerns about the traffic, and we also got a pretty comprehensive email with some concerns as well. And if I put myself in, if I lived on that road, I would have very similar concerns. So I think there's a delicate balance here, and that's why we've been working really closely. with the applicant and the lawyers to make sure that everything's in writing and specified.
Thanks. That was a good answer. We appreciate the opportunity to provide some comments. Thank you.
Always appreciate hearing comments. I know it's takes a lot to take some time out of your Wednesday evening to do your civic duty. So we certainly appreciate that as well.
Thanks.
Other comments from the public on this one?
I don't see anyone else raising their hand, but if you want to give it a minute, we'll give everyone one last chance if they want to speak. Members of the public. Yep, we have Bill. I could send him over.
Please.
Okay, Bill, you can unmute and then you can make your comment.
Yes, I am Bill Lawler, and Julie Lawler is sitting here with me. We are at 3 Dune Drive, and we appreciate that you have a lot of considerations to make. We just want to add that we have attended several of the musical productions or events at the barn, and we consider that they are making a tremendous cultural contribution to the area, which we have appreciated. We also were in attendance for the event that they held spatially spaced on the sand with a benefit for the community services of which we both volunteer for. So we consider that the events that they have in mind for the barn are of a great benefit to us, and we are very much interested and certainly hope they are able to carry them out. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill, for the comment. Any other thoughts or concerns from the board or the public or anyone else present?
I guess I'll just kind of echo your comment, Sam, about maybe wanting a little more specificity on these structures.
Size limit, maybe?
But I don't know. It just seems like it's kind of wide open.
Yeah.
And I know in my experience on the board, I just, not to cite anybody specifically, but we've had people come before us and say, oh, don't worry, we're going to do it like this. And you're not, whatever. And then, we pass it without a lot of limitations. And then, you see something get built and it's like, oh, that's not exactly what they were talking about. So if you don't put any limits on it up front, people I think it's only naturally take liberties throughout the process and things kind of transform into something other than what was envisioned by the board. So.
Yeah, I guess I would be interested in seeing further restrictions on the dwelling units, like a square footage limit or a volume limit or a number of bathrooms per structure limit, because I could definitely see some sort of fancy footwork to make it seem, and again, it's not a statement of mistrust of the intentions of the applicants to.
It's what's going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. It's what's going to happen down the road. And so I could see a situation where, we end up with a bunch of basically houses clustered together in this area or some other use that we're not imagining. But so I think, putting, and it's, I understand the desire to maintain some flexibility, but I also think that this is a unique situation, and it is also our duty to protect the abutters and the people that live on the road to the extent that we can while allowing this use. And I guess I'd like to add in response to a previous concern that I certainly see this as being of benefit to the town. I think it's not just a business proposition. I think it's it adds something to the town in terms culturally, as has been mentioned, but also I think there's a real benefit to the town to have thriving businesses that aren't just selling things, that are selling experiences, especially now. It seems like that's the way. And if they can do that safely, and I think it adds tremendous benefits. Are we ready to send the, Anna?
I was just gonna say, it seems like the most of the concerns that we've heard, both through the emails that Caroline has shared with us and a couple of the speakers have been about traffic, just like the number of cars and the visibility of that, and then the noise associated with them. Is there anything that could be added that would help relieve those fears that there'd be, way over 50 cars, or that the noise, I don't know. I'm just trying to think of anything that might help community members maybe alleviate their fears around the traffic concern. And I don't have any helpful suggestions, but it seems like from reading previous negative comments and then some of the concerns that recently came in, that's what it's really honed in on.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, that's going to be a site plan review issue. Then the project review board may choose to require a traffic study.
Okay.
And those concerns, I think, can and probably will be brought at that phase. I think that from a noise perspective, the fact that the existing noise ordinances are pretty strict, I don't see. I can certainly imagine a scenario in which people leave a concert and have a loud conversation outside. It's not that that's outside the realm of possibility, but I also think that there are existing protections, and I don't think it's in any current or future owners' interest to have noise complaints called in all the time. So I think that there's an incentive there to take precautions and avoid those kinds of situations. So that's just my personal take on it, at least.
Sam, with respect to your concerns about the dwelling or cabins,
Already.
They do.
would that also be something that we could take comfort that the site plan review will take care of, or do you think the planning board needs to deal with that?
That one, I feel like it's potentially a zoning language, because of the bulk standards or some other requirement that we could put in the zoning language that might address that and give a little bit more clarity to the project review board. I know one of the concerns that's come from the project review board in the probably distant but also recent past is that they look for specificity in the language so that they know what they're enforcing, and we don't leave it to be an entirely subjective task for them to enforce the language. So I guess and that's me personally, I would like to see a little bit more restriction on those dwelling units. But I think the applicants and their team have done a really good job of addressing the concerns so far. And I'd be personally comfortable if you, well, I guess it's really your choice, but I think we could go ahead and schedule a public hearing for next time, if that makes sense to everyone.
I agree.
Yep, thanks.
Does anyone else have anything to add on this?
Sam, I just want to clarify the process from here if the board does want to go in the direction on public hearing. So two things, the way the applicant revised the language, they did make reference to site plan review. I think you're right. Site plan review does have some standards for lighting and traffic, but it would be the current standards in place. So if you wanted additional bufferings or setbacks, this would be the place to do it. When the setbacks or these standards are put into place, this is what the project review board is going to use. And so I think the language you have before you tonight was the applicant's, intent to note some of those things and add some landscaping and buffer language and intent to address some of those concerns and things that Anna raised. I definitely agree with you on the campground question that the project review board isn't going to get into the use. The code officer is going to decide if it meets the use, and if they meet the use, then they're going to come in and get approval for the use with the performance standards in place. In regards to the process, the applicant's gotten some feedback from you guys tonight. I suspect they might tweak a couple things here and there. Once they feel like they have their final version, they will give it to staff to go through it. We will circulate among staff to make sure that as proposed, it's A, clear, and B, going to be interpreted how they intend intend to, use it or go forward with the property. We also like to have any new zoning language be reviewed by the town attorney before we can schedule that public hearing. We do need to have that final version of the draft language in place. So I think if the board wants to schedule it for October, that's great. If it does get hung up with the legal review, then that could delay us a little bit. But that's kind of how I see it going forward.
Yeah, I'm sure that the applicant's team would appreciate an October hearing at this point, or at least I suspect as much, given the delays to this point. That storm didn't do us any favors a few weeks ago. And yeah, I think if everything goes well and it gets pulled together quickly, then I'm certainly in favor of an October hearing. All right. Does that conclude any final comments? I think we've wrapped up that agenda item. Thanks one final time to the applicant's team for being here, and we look forward to seeing you hopefully next month.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Look forward to seeing you then. Thank you.
They're going to adjourn now.
I think
Item number 4 is a proposed zoning ordinance amendment to the VC1 regarding the setbacks. The change would change the word masonry to non-combustible with regards to measuring side and rear setbacks, and that's section 413.c.5. The applicant is Jim Cram from the Freeport Historical Society at 45 Main Street, map 11, lot 26, 26A, and 29. Caroline, do you mind giving us a little background on this one?
Yeah, sure. So this issue's actually come up a few times with recent construction. We have some different setbacks in the village, depending what buildings are constructed of, how the roof pitch is, whether or not there's a sidewalk, there's some different setbacks. So for the side and rear setback in the village, a standard that allows there to be no setback if masonry construction is used and the roof does not pitch in that direction. So masonry is very specifically defined in the building code. It's probably what you picture when you hear the term. A built-up construction, a combination of building units or materials of clay, shale, concrete, glass, gypsum, stone, or other approved units. And then it kind of goes on. So when the applicant came in, they wanted to use a different material. When we looked back at the definition, we could see that in the early 80s, the wording changed. It used to be that there was no setback if it were fire rated per the building code. And for some reason, they changed it to masonry. We went through planning board minutes and council minutes, and we can see that the change was adopted, but there's no reasoning. So the assumption has been that it was for fire rating purposes, unless they envisioned only masonry buildings in downtown Freeport. But I would say we haven't really built out that way. So the applicant's here with a word change before you. They were proposing to use non-combustible. I put 2 definitions from the building code for non-combustible construction or non-combustible material. And really it's going to be something that has the fire rating to be considered non-combustible. Jim Cram from the Freeport Historical Society, who's the applicant, is here. He could probably go into a little more if you're interested to hear about the types of non-combustible materials he's been discussing with the code officer and why they're bringing this proposal forward.
May I give you a little more background? Caroline did a great job as always, but I just want to lead off by saying that I've been in the construction business since 1971, so I'm speaking from a construction background much more than a historian's background. So, and when you look at this standard, I think the objective obviously is to protect lives and property from fire damage in a dense area. And building, I've built in many states and countries actually, but I mean, that's always the concern. And certainly in the 36 years since 1984, there have been tremendous strides in all sorts of building components. And I'm involved with the ACAF group and our efforts to renovate the First Parish Church. And this first came up there where we were talking about, we're building a new ADA ramp to get into the church where the new art gallery is going to be. And suddenly you're confronted with, wow, if you're strict about this term masonry, it's clunky construction. It's very heavy. If you're building something like an ADA ramp, wheelchair ramp, and if it has to be solid masonry, it's there's a lot to that. You've got to have a foundation that goes 4 feet below grade, to support this masonry structure. So, and then it came up again where the Historical Society we're now proposing to build a fireproof vault to protect our most valuable items. And the type of construction that we would prefer to use is the same thing that I've used many times building nursing homes or homes for the mentally challenged, where they can't get out of bed, or it has to be your highest standard of building for a fire if the building's on fire and the people can't get out. So the standard is non-combustible construction. And that's most typically done using a light gauge steel framing members and fireproof sheathing. Ends glass is most typical. And very often you're using a siding like the cement-based clapboards, or there are many materials that are thoroughly fire, they don't burn, they're non-combustible. So that's been going on for years, and how Freeport has evolved. I've been on the project review board, and even the standards are that you want to have some variation of materials when you're building on a street. And certainly Freeport is far from being all brick buildings. Or in the case of our new vault, it's going to look just like our existing barn. It's going to have the same proportions. And again, if you built that out of brick, it would look like a sewage treatment plant or a telephone utility box. It just wouldn't be appropriate. And it also doesn't accomplish the objective. Masonry has difficult insulation characteristics, right? There's just multiple reasons why the new materials that have been developed are very appropriate and perform to the standards we're looking for. And actually, my final example was during our most recent space exploration, when our astronauts are returning in this ball of fire, they're not sitting on a layer of bricks underneath that capsule when it enters the atmosphere. It's other materials that are out there that are available that are thoroughly fireproof, and the standard that Caroline states is pretty appropriate. So I feel like it's probably time that this one word just get changed to accommodate all the materials that exist today that are not masonry and don't carry the difficult aspects of masonry, just its weight and density and bulk and terrible insulating characteristics or moisture transfer, that sort of thing. Happy to answer any further questions.
This seems like a fairly straightforward request to me. As a fellow person who works in the building industry, I certainly can see where you're coming from on that. I know there are typically better and easier ways. While masonry has its place, it's not for every assembly. So, other concerns from the board or further questions, or we want any clarification about what? Can anybody think of a negative impact that changing the word would have? I've been trying to think of one, and I'm coming up short. All right, seems fairly easy. Any other any other things we need to have in mind, Caroline, before Anna?
I just had a question, which
Mhm.
Sam, you're probably gonna laugh at me being in the building industry, but when I'm looking at the application number, let's see, where C5. So if we change it to non-combustible for 5 feet, then when you're saying non-masonry construction, would that just be changed to combustible construction?
No, I think that's a good question. I mean, it probably speaks to the fire rating. I mean, maybe we could change it to non-fire rated, or it would have a different fire rating. Wood framing would be another, if it's wood framed construction, or although that leaves open, because it's certainly possible to build a fire rated assembly out of wood too. So, or that includes wood at least.
I think that's a good observation, Anna.
Yeah.
I think I can, I'll reach out to Nick Adams, our code officer. He worked with Jim and they kind of agreed on this term, but they didn't look at the other terms. So I'll reach out to the code officer and what he would kind of recommend as the best terminology there, if we should flip that other term without, making anything else non-conforming that exists today. You may, depending, again, I'll work with Sammy as the other one, who work with Jim and staff and the attorney if needed. It might come back to you with just a little tweak in the one word. We might want to say non-combustible per MUBEC building code, or we might want to add a definition. But if we do that, it would be a standard definition out of the building code. So you might see it come back in a slightly different version, although the changes would be relatively minor and just support what you have in front of you. And also, keep in mind that we're talking about Village Commercial 1. So we're really talking about the core of Freeport, which is also visible from any right of way in design review. So although you're changing this and potentially changing materials for things that are closer, they're still going to be subject to design review and get that layer of review and approval.
Would there be any sense, this may be a question for Jim or Caroline, would there be any sense in changing, rather than saying non-combustible, to putting a specific fire rating on it? And we could say, no setback if it's 60-minute fire rated or 2-hour or whatever it is. And then saying anything with a lower fire rating is subject to that setback. That might address. Well,
the building code definition of non-combustible material, I think, kind of has what you're looking for. It would be a material that, under the conditions anticipated, will not ignite or burn when subject to fire or heat. Materials that pass ASTME 136 are considered non-combustible materials. And that's referencing, I don't have the acronym abbreviation or spelled out in front of me, but that's referencing a specific code pertaining to the rating fire.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think non-combustible is actually more restrictive than a 2-hour rated assembly. But the hour rating, I think, does refer more to assemblies than it does to materials.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, because you can have a 2-hour rated assembly that has wood studs in it. I mean, if you
right
layers of drywall on it or whatever else. So, yeah, it's an interesting one. I think that's good. Yeah, it's probably a good question for Nick. I mean,
right. I think this may have come from, interpretation as well, because obviously in the last 36 years, there have been some buildings built in this area that weren't solid brick, or had stone pillars and, holding up windows. So, if you get, the more rigid you are in interpreting that word, someone else might have said that a cement-based clapboard was masonry, even if it was nailed to a wooden stud. Non-combustible is a higher standard, so which doesn't allow that much flexibility, I guess, if it's non-combustible.
Although if you have a non-combustible clapboard that's nailed to wood framing, does that?
Well, I'm not asking for that. I'm asking for a non-combustible clapboard nailed to a, a light gauge stud. So the whole assembly is, like a nursing home, the structure is just not supposed to burn.
Right.
My understanding.
Yep. Sorry, go ahead, Caroline.
Sorry, my understanding from talking to the code officer is that it's not just what's covering the outside, it's the actual.
It's the assembly.
construction,
Yeah.
Yeah, of that exterior wall. But if it would be helpful to get clarification on the new definitions of in any way, I'm sure he'd be happy to weigh in and give you what you need.
That might be helpful. Just thinking about, because Nick's interpretation and, the next code officer 30 years down the line, or
So what would you like him to specifically clarify for the next meeting?
I have to look at the language. I think Anna's point is the main point of what is the standard at which the setback applies. Is it anything lower than non-combustible, I guess.
Yeah, and I wasn't even sure exactly what the point I was making. It just seemed weird to say combustible. Not.
Yeah.
I have 3 kids that my husband needs help putting them to bed. So I'm going to put my video off, but then I will come join if you guys are still there.
I think I can't really see anything that would hold up a public hearing on this one. It seems like a pretty straightforward change, assuming that we can get that clarification from Nick and it all makes sense.
You do have one member of the public here. I don't know if you guys want to take comment.
Feel free to raise your hand. T. Neem? I don't know. Not sure how to pronounce the name, but we're certainly willing to take public comment if the member of the public wants to comment. Doesn't appear. I don't see any virtual hands coming up. Jim, does that give you enough direction for next time?
Yeah, no, well, hopefully we can go to the public hearing. It turns out the foundation that we're building a 2-story vault that with a very heavily reinforced floor system. So the engineer says that if we had to go with brick, it would hold it, the same foundation. So we're going to put one of those compact library systems on the upper deck. So it's a pretty robust foundation. So
the safety factor take care of the brick too. So
yeah. If I was to, my goal is to get this foundation in before it freezes. That's the goal. So.
All right. Moving on to agenda item 5. I suspect this is going to be a quick one. Anyone need to address the board on non-agenda items? Very good. Everybody's favorite, number 6. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
We get to do our roll call. Do we have to have Anna come back for the roll call, or can we adjourn with 4 as a quorum, right?
Yeah, you have a quorum, so that's fine. The minutes will just reflect that she left a few minutes ago.
All right. Roll call. Aaron.
Yes, aye.
Greg.
Aye.
Wayne.
Aye.
And I also vote aye. Thanks for donating a portion of your Wednesday evening, most of it anyway, to the planning board. And it's good to see all of you virtually. Hopefully we can do it in person someday. All right, everyone. Have a good night.
All right, thank you.
I
And
know.
just so you
Miss
know,
you.
October 7th is the tentative date of the next meeting.
All righty.
See you
All
then.
right,
Y'all,
thanks, everyone.
if not before.